Hey kittens! So this is a video I've been meaning to do for a while. Um, Today's National Bipolar World Bipolar Day. The whole world gets to know about us. But I do have type 2 bipolar. I feel like I've mentioned that in a vlog or two before. I've done some volunteering where I had to write down my story and present it at the university that I'm actually going to now. So I was thinking that I would just kind of read out some of my medical journey. Hopefully I won't cry as much as I did when I gave it at the university. Yeah, I hope you guys appreciate just some knowledge. All right. When I hit puberty, I was quickly diagnosed with depression. I had always been an emotional child, so no one was surprised. I was put on Celexa. My family doctor was very nonchalant about putting me on this med, and you want nothing more than to trust your family doctor. I was never spoken to about the interactions, and I would only go in for refills. I never had my heart health monitored either, which is something that you're supposed to check at least once a month when you're on Celexa, as well as a couple organ things. It's pretty intense sometimes. They actually put a cap on it since then, that you can't actually have over a certain amount that you could have when I started taking it. The older I got, the more prominent the effects of taking an SSRI as someone with bipolar was. I was a teenager, so all of the red flags, it was kind of easy to hide them from my parents. My mania really grew, but it's just what I thought being a teenager was like, because no one really talks to you about, hey, this is a manic episode, when you're in a family that doesn't have it diagnosed previously, and no one's just gonna come with a book of mental illnesses and be like, hey kids, let's talk about mental illness. At least they don't in school. God, would that be lovely. But anyways, I just thought that my manic episodes were just what being a teenager was. I was playing chicken on the highway with no seatbelt on, and my car at the time was a 92 Tempo. It had no airbags, so I was completely just like, I would have been gone. I had promiscuous tendencies with men as old as their 40s. I treated my friends like they were toys, playing with their emotions and lives. Honestly, I would set someone up with someone and then I'd go make out with that dude, and like, I was a menace. It was so bad. But if my doctor had been having more of a one-on-one relationship with me, I think that we could have potentially had open conversations about how I was actually doing. And I think my life might have been very different, because I think it would have red flagged. Because the reason those manic things were so wild, not just that I was experiencing them for the first time, but when you have such highs and such lows, and you're only taking something that brings you up, your highs are way higher. So it's not good. I kept my mental struggle with my meds hidden from my parents best I could. Most people I interacted with either avoid meds or struggle taking them because you kind of feel like you've got the crazy label written across your head once you commit to meds, or at least that's how I felt. I was so afraid of feeling that way. Every time I started to feel better, I would stop because I thought I no longer needed them, which is just the meds working. I know now. But I would crash, restart the cycle, and it went on and on. No one was monitoring my meds or my behavior, and I really didn't feel like there was anyone I could talk to. I felt like this was just normal. I eventually started crushing up my pills and planning my own suicide. One of my close friends took advantage of this, and I was sexually assaulted for the first time. I tried to reach out and spoke with my school counselor. My parents were notified, but nothing happened to the boy, and the RCMP didn't want to pursue it since it would be the word of two minors against each other. I was well-spoken and self-aware, so I was often treated like I didn't need the extra help. I moved out less than a month after I turned 18. My parents had become more and more aware of my manic behavior that was getting out of control. I spent a year working and living alone. I drank too much. I cheated on the 40-year-old man that I was now dating. He was 24 years older than me. And I even lit my room on fire at one point, just to see what would happen. My landlord never noticed, not even when I moved out. So I didn't let it go too far, just a little bit of carpet. My parents pressured me to go to university, so I started at the university in the fall. Being in this new environment with a full course load of 5 classes each semester, and working part-time to keep up with my bills, my mental illness truly came at me. My doctor this whole time had just been writing me refills and told me to increase by half a pill periodically if I didn't feel like I had enough. There was no monitoring, and I hadn't seen him since before I moved out with my parents, and I ended up living essentially off of cigarettes and energy drinks. I made many decisions that I can't take back and could come back to threaten my life or future career at any time. My parents often only knew I was alive from texting my roommate, which she was kind of rude about, but whatever. I get it's not her responsibility that I'm alive, but yeah. My family doctor moved back to South Africa, and I finally had to find a doctor to help me out if I really wanted to get out of bed. I failed so many classes from the times I just couldn't get out of bed. My average dropped almost exactly 50% from when I was in high school. So it went from 80-some to 30-some. I'm not dumb. Hopefully you guys get the not dumb from how I speak and everything. I know I have a lot of ums and ums, but I'm not dumb. But it just real down. So I'd been monitored for so long, I was completely out of my element. I feel so bad for how I reacted to the poor doctor at the university clinic. He wanted to check my heart activity and make sure I was healthy, and worst of all, at the time, he wanted to cut my meds drastically. Like I was saying, with the health problems with the heart, that's when that came in. Just because very minimal cases had been coming up with issues for that. Instead of working with him and trusting that the doctor knows best, I went off my pills. That summer, I lined up a job at a local national park. I had a bachelor suite all to myself, right on the beach. I spent most of my money drinking since my then old boyfriend had turned into my old fiance. He talked me out of smoking, so I just drank way too much and wasn't smoking at the time. I broke up with him that summer and eventually went a little bit more wild sexually. I was drugged and raped by a friend of a friend on a night out. That was my second assault. I sobered up it kind of sobered up again. Now I had a whole nother mental health battle to deal with. Just kind of like how I talked about in my talking about my angries. Sexual assault really sticks with you. Doesn't really go much of anywhere. The RCMP refused to even question him, considering he was a government employee, and they didn't want to ruin his life. They told me that I wouldn't have a leg to stand on, and maybe if I went to go get a tox screen and prove I was drugged, then I might have something. But yeah, before I move on, I didn't really cover this in the university talk just because I find it a little crude. But I woke up that morning after the assault in the forest, covered in my own puke. I still washed up and went to work that day. I was so scared to really talk to anyone about it, even the people I was working for. Like, I don't think I should have stayed working full time, but that's what I did, because that guy was a park worker. Near the end of the summer, I was too scared to go outside between the hotel and my suite that was like probably 20 feet away building wise. So yeah, it was pretty massive. The one night I got really drunk and actually approached him and asked him why, because at that time I was fairly sexually open. He wasn't my type, but it's something where I didn't understand why he hadn't made sober advances, but he had drugged me and assaulted me, and that just didn't make sense in my mind. So I outright asked him one night when I was really trashed. This was before I started feeling too scared to go out, but I was still only going out with friends, large groups of them. And he told me, he taught me something about growing up now, didn't he? I never went back to that bar. I started staying in the place. So the RCMP told me that I might be able to go get a tox screen, but honestly, I didn't come forward to them for some time, and they knew that. And there's two things that stand out about the interaction at the clinic, now that I look back. There are some systemic issues. Oh, I totally skipped a bunch. Anyways, I took everything I had to drive to the local city, and go to a walk-in clinic to get tested for drugs. And the RCMP had not told me that it was past the window to be able to have drugs still left in my system. The nurse who addressed me was downright cruel. She told me that the RCMP had wasted her time and she had other patients to see and sent me away without a single resource or time to absorb this information. Yeah. So the things that stick out to me when I look back is that there are some really systemic issues that make it difficult to ever expect doctors to meet expectations that we truly need of them. The hours and pace that they're expected to work are ridiculous. Until we resolve those issues, things like in Canada we have patient and family advisory councils and programs, and they work with our medical system to make sure that they are patient first, which is fairly new, but beautiful that the country is trying to think of the people getting care, not just the money or how it looks on paper. It'll take work to improve that system, but I think it's really necessary. It's another thing that makes me super concerned about the current state of the healthcare system with COVID-19. And I really hope that the healthcare system is taking care of their employees best they can. Like, I know there's only so much they can do, and there's so much that needs doing. But my prayers and hopes and thoughts definitely go out to those on the front lines right now. The other thing that stuck out to me was how critical it is to be of victim care. That was my first experience of something that causes a trigger. The smell of the clinic. I've even experienced repercussions of it while receiving my first tattoo from the disinfectant smell. It really triggered me. So when someone says triggered, I know it's very memed in SJW, but when it comes to actual assault terms and victim terms, it's when something sensory takes you from the present and throws you into a harmful situation you had in the past. Your body just associates it that way, and you have to be, there's specific tools and things you can learn to try and ground yourself back in the present, but it's difficult, and takes so long to learn, but you're stuck right back in your trauma. It's not just a mental thing. Your body reacts as if it's in that trauma again, which is so when people talk about triggers in a legitimate way, that's what they mean. But yeah, when I went to get my first tattoo, totally freaked out because I was brought back to that clinic and how that felt and all of that with the nurse, with the disinfectant smell in the tattoo shop. People who are victims of assault or survivors of assault, or any trauma, they've lost ownership of their bodies, and simple actions like asking permission to touch them can change their whole day. It can be hard to spot a victim, but making this a habit is very good. Can do so much good that you'll never see the outcome of. I'm going to, and is it okay if I are a world of difference if it isn't you? Saying I'm going to is like giving a warning, saying this is going to happen whether you like it or not. Saying, is it okay if, gives that person autonomy of their body again. And it's something so small, but it's so important. Later that summer, my mother went to a walk-in clinic and got a referral to a better psychologist. She recommended that I do the same. I went in and it was honestly really simple. It was just a little questionnaire, and it put my life on such a different track. He took the time to test me. He took the time to refer me. I now had access to a psychologist who is able to diagnose me as bipolar 2. Some people find a diagnosis like that to be intimidating, but I was so excited to be on a completely different meds and hopefully be on the right track. I disclosed my meds, I felt listened to for the first time in a long time, and I trusted my doctor. I had a voice in my care. The best thing that doctor ever did for me was refer me to community programs locally. And I was provided with so much education and care between sessions. I started to feel like I had some control in my life. I cannot say enough good things about community programs and cognitive behavioral therapy, and how important they are to mental health. They are the difference between life and death some days. Honestly, right now, I'm super concerned and scared because I don't have group therapy or counseling to go to right now, because it is a community program that is free, and they aren't running right now with COVID-19 because they're not considered essential services, which is ridiculous because the booze stores and the cannabis stores are. Thanks, Canada. Not that they aren't important. I was working late alone one night, and I had a miscarriage. I was not trying for a baby. I hadn't had the traditional symptoms that people associate with pregnancy. I wasn't even seeing the would-have-been father anymore. I went to a walk-in, and they couldn't tell me if I had had a miscarriage or if I was still pregnant. Not for sure. I never thought that I was someone who would get an abortion, but I was now in a place where I wasn't sure if I would have to have a D&C or not for personal health reasons. I went off my meds. I was sent for multiple ultrasounds and given a pill to take to try to get rid of the residual residue attached to my uterus, and I knew I wasn't pregnant, but it was still I was still in the dark about whether I would need a D&C. I was eventually sent to a gynecologist for a D&C, which once I was sent for which she sent me for a final ultrasound, and turns out there was nothing there. I was fine. No one knows your patient better than they know themselves. They deserve a voice, to be respected, and a member of their own healthcare. If you guys don't know what a D&C is, it's what most people think of when they think of an abortion, but essentially it's scraping out the womb. And if you have residual tissue after a traumatic incident like that, if there's tissue left, it can get infected and you can die. So upon all this stress and not knowing what I was going to do or any of that, I had to deal with not knowing if medically I was going to get an infection and die, which Canada, so I went somewhere so they would prevent that from happening, but still, it's scary. I went back on my medication. I started to feel a little bit more stable. I experienced an issue with a customer where I was working at the time, who was being sexually inappropriate. Essentially, they would corner me. They would call in and ask when I was working so they could be there when I was there. They were far too close to me all the time. Would try and rub up against me. It was not okay. My assault trauma returned in full force, and I was referred to the local sexual assault center. The people there are truly amazing. If you ever have someone or need to go to that kind of support, please look for your local programs. You'd be surprised what you can find. Education and support was. Group therapy was totally scary the first time I went, but I miss it so much right now. The group of girls there is beyond amazing, and such a great support system in and out of group. So at this point in my life, I'm in a not healthy, very codependent, I don't want to say abusive, but very unhealthy relationship. And I got pregnant. My partner and I at the time, we had previously decided that if something like that happened, we were going to have an abortion. Just because I had to think about it before. That was something I was very sure about, was that I didn't want to have a child I couldn't provide for and support. So I went off my pills again, just because one of the pills I was on, lamotrigine, can really mess with a pregnancy. So just in case, for safety, I didn't want to have another miscarriage. I wanted it to be done correctly. I went in to my gynecologist, and she essentially told me, I don't do that. Which, I get, you have your morals and stuff, but it feels like in a country where it's legal, you shouldn't be in a medical profession where you're not willing to do the whole job. So I was sent to an older man who was very intimidating and just kind of told me what was going to happen. I wasn't that far along when we found out, but he likely purposely, I can't prove it, but he had a habit of pushing surgeries like that up until right before the legal deadline, so that you might be going through a way more serious surgery. Like, I found out later, I could have just had a couple pills and had it dealt with, but instead he booked me for the surgery, full-on surgery, and a lot of doctors do that in hopes that their patient will back up, and then not have time to deal with it. I was tried to look at the ultrasound. I was shamed for not knowing when my last period was. In my mind, I hate when they ask the menstruation question, because I have never tracked mine and I'm not good at it. And now that I'm on an IUD, it just doesn't happen. So my things like 8 years ago. But I would rather give someone the honest truth of I don't remember than guesstimating and having it completely wrong when my health is on the line. And people are always very upset with me that I won't give them some fake date. I think one of the toughest ones was I was getting blood tests just to make sure everything was ready to go and all my medical stuff was okay. And so I went to one of the labs to get my blood and stuff taken, and I had to go alone, even though I was still with my partner at the time. He just didn't feel like it. And there was this damn woman who's like 7 months pregnant, with her cell phone out. Like, the rest of the place is silent. It's so respectful to just not talk on your phone. But she had her phone out, and she was so loud, and all she was talking about was how happy she was to have her child and how excited she was to have her child. And as I'm sitting there, pregnant, preparing to go through the hardest thing I've ever gone through, likely. I think that's still the hardest thing I've ever gone through. That and the miscarriage are pretty high up there. I think it was harder though. She was there just so happy and so in another place that I don't know if I'll ever be. I think something that's really scary once you've had an assault is, like I was saying earlier, you really don't feel like your body is yours anymore. And when you're working on getting that, hey, this is mine, this is where I live, this is who I am, back into your physical body. And then you have this little alien type thing growing inside you. It's like, even if I wasn't in so many bad situations that there is no way I could have had that child safely and had that child grow up safe and healthy. Sorry, I went on a ramble and now I don't remember what I was talking about. I know many people are against it. But I don't want anyone out there thinking that this was just something I did nonchalant. I was on the pill the whole time. I used protection. Spoilers for later. Anyways, I ended up getting a new job, and I was flown out to another province to do my training, and just sitting there in a hotel in a city where I don't know anyone, pregnant on Mother's Day, was fucked up. It was real bad. But the surgery ended up falling in between my training. So I was flown out to do my training for a week, flown back home to have my procedure, and then flown back out to finish my training. So I had about a day or two of recovery before I just had to get back to life. And like, things changed, so it ended up being about a day, because the emergency needed someone at that store when I got there, so I didn't have the night off when I flew there. I went straight to the store that was training me. When I went to have the procedure, They make you wait for so long, and I know that's dumb, that's a bad thing, but you just get so worked up. And there had been a miscommunication. I was under the understanding that I would be completely knocked out, but that's not how that works. The last thing I remember was just, sorry, that's nasty. The last thing I remember is really sobbing my face off, so scared, because I knew I couldn't handle it. The next thing I remember is being in the recovery place, and my partner was okay about making me feel better. He waited for the whole thing and he picked me up. He was living right across from the hospital, so yeah, I was a little upset that he wouldn't do. I had some morning exercises, like grief exercises, that my counselor had given me, and he just thought they were silly. But this is something that's still so serious to me and still means so much to me. So clearly the pill wasn't working for me if I'd had a miscarriage and an abortion. So I went in to get my first IUD, and it hurt so much. They gave me some Advil liquid gels ahead of time, but like right before it. And after just having gone through that, and with my trauma past, I was sobbing and yelling. And the doctor told me to stop crying because I was making him feel bad. Yeah. Last time I saw that doctor. Thank God. So when I went back to see my psych about getting back on my meds, he essentially, his reaction to me going on an IUD, not to the miscarriage, not to the abortion, but to me going on an IUD after I had always disclosed my meds to him, his reaction was, oh yeah, no, your main pill makes the pill not work. So, both of the hardest things in my life could have been avoided if someone had done a little bit more paperwork or paid attention. The very upsetting thing is he is a very renowned doctor where I live, and he's the leading in his field where I live. Yeah. Details matter. Patients want to trust their doctors, but in situations like that, you just don't know if you can ever trust another medical professional. My symptoms are still fairly prominent, and I've had troubles with my speech and my hands, a lot of like shakes and muscle contractions and shit. And then I had some auditory hallucinations. And of course, suicidal thoughts. But I have a new psych. He's been with me for just over a year. And I really trust him, and I really feel listened to. I get the last say on everything that happens to me, and I get informed as much as possible about all of the reactions and everything that can happen to me. I do finally have a family doctor as well. That was something I hadn't had since my childhood doctor. So it took like 10 years to get another. And he's pretty amazing too. So things are in an upswing. But medical journeys are tough. And I know this was like bipolar day post, but nothing's that simple. Everything's intertwined. Like, they're not sure if I have OCD because the auditory hallucinations I was getting were an obsessive compulsive thing. Took them forever to diagnose me officially with generalized anxiety disorder. Yeah. So that was a depressing video. I'm sorry for crying. I won't blame you if you cried. I guess just remember to look at your local programs. I was able to even take a complete 2-month-long course on bipolar to educate myself for free. Make a routine best you can. If you're not sure what's wrong and you feel like what you're experiencing isn't quite normal, but it's your normal, don't be afraid to talk to a doctor about it. And if they won't listen, get a new doctor. I am very lucky to live somewhere where I don't have to pay my psychologist, and I don't have to pay for counseling. It's bad enough that right now I don't have coverage because I messed up my paperwork for university, so I don't have insurance to cover my meds right now, and I'm on 5 different meds just to keep me balanced and functioning. So I have to take a large chunk of my student loans, which is my only income, to pay for that. I don't know how many people would actually watch this video all this way. I try so hard to put off a brave face and make jokes, but I wouldn't wish anything that I've gone through on anyone else. I do my best, and that's all I can do. And doing my best has gotten me this far, and still being alive is still new to me. And I know you guys can make it too if anyone else is going through the same shit. Alright. I love you guys. Oh, my hands. That's the handshaking I was talking about. Okay, see ya.